Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. The Black Ops 7 beta is here. And of course, as you're jumping into your first games, you want to make sure your settings are right, whether you're playing on console or PC. And I've got you guys covered here today. We're going through everything: controller, graphics, interface, every main setting you need to focus on and change. We'll be covering here in the video. There will be timestamps if you want to skip to a certain section, or if you just want to go through one by one with everything we're covering here today, feel free to do so as well. Keep in mind also, shout out to my friends at Activision. They actually ended up sending me over a couple of BNet beta codes, and I'll have those on screen throughout the video. It's just a first come, first serve sort of deal. So if you got notifications on with your subscription here, you might get yourself an early access beta code. But that said, let's jump into our settings. So when you boot up the game, you're going to have quite a bit to go through and adjust. If you're playing on controller versus keyboard and mouse, graphics, we definitely have to adjust a lot, audio interface, the whole nine. So let's start with controller here. First up, if you're playing on controller, make sure that's your input here. Button layout, I personally have always played on tactical with my scuff and everything, so that my right stick is actually my crouch. I can drop shot easier with that. My back paddle is just going to be my melee there instead. But that said, if you wanted to go through and customize all this, you could technically remap any of this. I have no clue what this L3 reset to 75 is. That's also popping up there. Seems like the menus might be a little bit buggy, but yeah, if you want to go through and just customize this entirely, you can do so and change this to whatever you want, or you could go through and just do tactical. If there's another preset one that you enjoy, feel free to rock that. Stick layout, I personally leave as default. If you want to change that, go ahead and do so. For my sensitivities, I've always played a little bit staggered. So right now with their new updated sensitivity options here, I'm on a 1.9 horizontal and a 1.8 vertical. This plays out to about a medium area sensitivity rather than going 0 to 20. I've always played anywhere from like 6 to 9 or so, and this ends up being right in that area there. You can fine tune this as needed, but I do like having horizontal a little bit higher than my vertical, just because we're doing a little bit more movement left to right there. I don't use any of the simplified stuff for the presets there. I leave all that on off. I leave controller vibration off. Trigger effects are off if you have a PlayStation 5 controller that's got the haptic feedbacks. Dead zone inputs is very important here though. First thing you want to do is set your left stick min to 0 and your right stick min to 0, because then you can go through and start this actual test here. And you'll notice that when you go through and you move your thumbsticks around, when you stop and you get your hands off the controller, you might notice there's input being detected, and that is your stick drift. This is different for everyone, so don't just copy mine. You're gonna have to test on what yours is, but I have mine there before me. I see what the numbers are. The thing is though, left stick min means that my left stick is basically always detecting input if I leave it at 0, meaning rotational aim assist is always going to activate. If there's any kind of input being detected, rotational aim assist will function, so you can kind of cheese that by leaving that at 0. Right stick min, I don't want my right stick, my aiming stick, to drift at all, so I leave that just above what the numbers were when you stop moving it. I also go through, I've actually inverted these, but I go with my left stick max down to about 65 and then my right stick max to about 90 there. It's just going to require less motion to activate fully there, so I can get the sprinting on my left stick a little bit higher there, so that's nice and easy. And then your triggers, I leave it 0 because you want the fastest actuation there basically, so you can get right into that. So those are the basic controller settings there. We then have our aiming stuff. So here, sensitivity multipliers, I don't really mess with any of this. We are going to get more in depth with some of the sensitivity stuff in just a moment. However, look inversion I keep on standard, and then we go into our advanced aiming settings. So my ADS sensitivity transition, I like to be as instant, just so the second I start ADSing, my custom sensitivities will kick into effect. I leave the correction type as just the basic assist. Then dynamic I have as my aim response curve type, just definitely feels the snappiest with that reverse S curve. If you want to adjust the slope scale, you can mess around with this, but this is a very technical thing, and if you're looking to adjust this, you already know what you're doing with this. Most players can just leave this at 1 and you're going to be just fine there. What I also find to be very important though is the custom sensitivity per zoom here. Basically, I just scale up here, and I still don't know why the favorite thing here is just popping up in the middle of the settings, but basically my lower zooms, I have at a lower value. So my low zoom is a 0.8, my 2 to 3 is a 0.83, which you have to manually type in. Otherwise, it's just intervals of 5. You can do 0.85 for this and be fine. It's all going to be a little bit personal preference here. But basically with the lower zooms, I want to be a little bit more precise, whereas with my high zooms, I leave that as 1. That way it's not too slow, because when you zoom in further, it's going to take more to move across the screen and actually follow up players, and if it's too slow, you're not going to be able to catch up with them with that increased zoom. So I go from 0.8 all the way up to 1 here, and just gradually increase that over time there. Target aim assist I leave on. I don't do anything with motion sensor function like the gyro aiming. I don't do any of that. Again, if you are looking to change that, you already know what you're doing with everything there. Movement updates here. Sprint assist first and foremost. I leave this just like I have it in Black Ops 6 basically. Sprint assist delay I keep on 1. If you just are using a controller, it's only going to be 0 or 50. I'd probably recommend leaving it at 0. But if you plug in a keyboard into your console, or if you're on PC, you can type in 1 and it's going to just make your auto tack sprint basically, which we'll set up here, just a little bit faster, a little bit more snappy, it feels like, in terms of response. And then sprint sideways and backwards I have on. I leave everything off for mantle assist and crouch assist there. I do actually turn off the corner slice here. I'm not a fan of that, so I leave that off. Wall jump assist, I want to do all that by myself. I want to be in control of that, and then the active roll as well, so I currently have those off. Slide and dive behavior, I have tap to slide, just so I have to slide once off of just a single tap. I don't have to hold anything and delay my gameplay there. I do, however, have the dive as a medium duration there, so if I still want to control my dive, I can do that very easy. Airborne automatic mantle is partial initially, but because I have grounded mantle set to off, it just grays that out basically. Sprint restore I have on. If you want to save your left thumbstick some, you can do that. Slide maintain sprints. Basically, this is going to be a slide canceling setting. If you want to do it or not, you can turn it on or off there. But slide maintain sprints on means you continue to sprint after performing a slide. There's not really a slide cancel involved in that. Wingsuit activation manual, I want to do that by myself. Wall jump activation I just have as a basic press. Slide and active roll is a tap to slide there. Active roll, you can do third person or first person. First person's a little bit jarring. Third person also kind of weird. I just don't find myself doing the roll that much. Then movement advanced settings here. Tack sprint behavior is going to be on a toggle here. Auto move forward off, don't want that. I don't like the auto door peek or grounded mantle as mentioned. Tack sprint, single tap run, I want to go straight to a single tap tack sprint while running there basically. Some people like single tap sprint as well. Really just comes down to preference and how much you like spamming that, but either way there, you want to have single tap either sprint or run turned on, so you don't have to worry about that. But for what it's worth, tack sprint only ever a thing if you have the tack sprint or perk on. Just the basic sprint here is going to be there by default. It'll be easier to activate. No double tap or anything required if you change those over. Plunging underwater on free. Sprinting door bash I do like on, so I can just quickly burst through a door there. And then the vehicle advanced stuff, I just left all the default stuff on there basically. We move on over to the combat mechanics here, and combat controls. Hold for my ADS weapon mount activation. I have on ADS and melee. I'll never accidentally press that, so I'm always in full control of my mount there. Dedicated melee is just to hold my melee button. Prioritize finishing move over the body shield. If you want to do one versus the other, you can change that. Plates apply all. C4 detonation, you can do either all at once or one by one. Most people will probably opt for one by one here. Equipment behaviors, hold manual fire behavior is going to be just the default there of press. I would love to see that fully, but no, we have to have this weird pop-up that's bugged. Then for the advanced settings here, focus behavior, it won't matter because you have the change zoom set to your sprint, so I don't have to worry about that. Change D-pad is just simply a ping there. Changing the zoom is just going to be my sprint button. This is mostly personal preference here for what it's worth. Weapon mount exit, I want as instant there basically, so I can quickly get out of that. Tap to reload is what I use in multiplayer. I use tap to interact or prioritize interact in Warzone here, but either tap to reload or prioritize reload in multiplayer is going to be my go-to. Mantle cancels reload, you can do that if you want. Same deal with sprint cancels reload. I prefer not to have that just because I'm doing so much sprinting. Sometimes I'll accidentally mess that up. Akimbo behavior I have is paired, so either one of my triggers will activate my akimbo weapons there. ADS stick swap off. Depleted weapon ammo switch I have on off personally. Weapon mount movements, if you want to have that on, you can do so. More so preference there. Weapon mount return off there as well, again sort of a preference thing. And then the scoreboard and overlay stuff I just mostly leave as default there, not really messing with any of that. Now with keyboard and mouse, unlike controller where we go through and we adjust super specific settings, this is largely all going to be preference at the end of the day. You can still do the similar movement stuff that we just did on controller here, but like really keybinds are personal preference. Your mouse sensitivity and DPI is all personal preference. There's not really best settings for keyboard and mouse as always, like there is with controller where there are objectively, you know, better things and more advantageous things to do. This is going to come down to your desk space, your mouse, your keyboard, your specific bind. So there's not really best settings we can give here. It's going to come down to what works well for your setup, your binds, your sensitivity, and everything like that. We then move over to graphics, and there's a lot going on here that we want to pay attention to. This, of course, though, is going to differ if you're playing on PC versus console. I'm on PC, so I have every single graphic setting possible. On console, it's going to be a bit more limited, mostly in quality and view here, especially. We'll have some things to discuss and break down there, but want to make sure we cover absolutely everything for all platforms. So keep in mind, by the way, as we do so, if you guys enjoy the video, you find the information helpful, a like rating is always seriously appreciated. Much love to everyone who does take the time to do so. And if you're new to the channel, you want to ensure you're always up to date with everything going on in COD, no better place than right here. So feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. Help get us one step closer to hitting 1 million subs. So first up here, display mode. I'm always in full screen. That's where I get the best frames. Personally, obviously, I want it as my display monitor. I got a 5090 in this PC, so of course I'm on that, and I have a 480 hertz 1440p monitor, so I set it to the default settings on that. My display gamma is just going to be the basic 2.2. My base brightness, usually I bump up to about 55 when I play. That's always sort of been my standard here. Reflex low latency is going to be very setup dependent. So what you want to do here essentially is go into your overlay settings, the telemetry, and turn on GPU time and CPU time, so you can see the response time of those. Then load into a game. If your CPU time is higher, you want on plus boost. If your GPU time is higher, then you just want on. Either way, you're going to want one of these on. You just need to figure out which one works for your system, because it is going to help out with performance there. I don't use any eco mode preset. I have that turned off. I don't use VSync for anything there. I customize my frame rate just for recording purposes, basically to limit screen tearing and whatnot, but have it at whatever your monitor is if you can. Native render resolution on the menu there. Then most of this stuff at the bottom doesn't really matter. I don't play with HDR on either. For quality here, this again is going to be very specific to your setups, and it's sort of a universal thing when it comes to a lot of this. Typically, if you want a really good frame rate, you just want the max frames, the smoothest feeling game, you're going to turn most of the settings here to medium or low. If you want your game to look pretty, you go medium and high, but that is going to come with the cost of frames. So that's just like the general rule of thumb. It really comes down to what your setup is like, though. I have a 9950 X3D in here, a 5090. Like, this is an overkill PC, so I leave most of my stuff on medium to high or above so that the game looks pretty for the videos for you guys, but also I still have a decent frame rate, and I'll turn things down if needed when I'm noticing like weird frame stuff. But first up, render res, keep it 100. I don't do dynamic resolution because that's going to make my game look weird at times because it's trying to meet a certain frame rate there. For upscaling, I've always been a big fan of fidelity cast. Obviously, if you're playing in like 4K or something, you probably like DLSS, but for me, fidelity cast turned up to about 80 there just makes the game look really crisp and really sharp. There, I don't use any frame generation. The input lag there's a little bit too noticeable for me. Not really a fan of that. VRAM scale I keep on 70. Variable rate shading on. Then we get into all the specific stuff, like I said, really for your PC. So I'm able to run high on a lot of this stuff and not really notice too terrible frame drops here. But if your PC's more of like a middle of the pack one, you probably want normal. You probably want low on a lot of this stuff here. So adjust as needed. But texture reg, I keep on normal to high. The texture filter, normal to high. Depth of field, no one wants that on, so turn that off, please. Detail quality, I keep on high just to keep the game looking pretty. Particle resolution, don't need that too much, so I keep that on low. I do like having bullet impacts and persistent effects, just gonna give you information in game that could be valuable there. Shader quality, high, optimized, but I keep the streaming quality on low there. Normal shadow quality, screen space shadows high, screen space lighting high, medium, doesn't really matter too much there. Again, just change it as needed for your PC and your specs there. Screen space reflections, though, I keep on off. It's going to make it easier to see players underwater, behind glass, things of that nature if you keep this off. And you could do the same with static reflection quality, but really just going to come down again to either high or low, whatever you need for your optimal setup there with your frames. Terrain quality, for me, very high. For most people, medium, high, low is probably going to be where you want to have that. High for pretty much everything else here with all the different quality things. For volumetric, deferred physics, water, weather, all sorts of stuff like that, I keep usually on normal just for the ideal frame rate there. Hey everyone, obviously pretty crazy time right now for games. There's so much to play with. You're diving into Battlefield 6, Black Ops 7 in the beta going on, new season of Black Ops 6 in Warzone as well. If you're looking to stay hydrated, energized while you're doing any gaming, maybe any work or school, look no further than G Fuel. They've got the brand new Formula 2.0 in some select flavors, and it is absolutely phenomenal. Hype sauce has been my go-to as of late, but they got a bunch of selections there. They of course have their hydration flavors features as well. But just a heads up, if you want to grab anything at all from the G Fuel site, be sure to toss in code Immortal at checkout for a discount. Link for that will be down in the description below. Then for view, obviously a lot of console options here as well, plus PC stuff. So I don't use any of the presets. If you don't want arachnophobia stuff, you can turn that on. If you just don't care about that, you can leave it off. I play max FOV. Typically the sweet spot's about 105, 110 for most players. In multiplayer, I like 120 a lot. Affected FOV is going to give you lower visual recoil by zooming out your weapon a little bit closer to what your actual FOV is, so I always run that. Wide field of view for weapon and vehicle there, and then third person I keep max on 90. Please turn off all of your motion blurs, world motion blur, weapon motion blur, and then change all your camera movement to least so that your screen's not going to be bouncing around when things are happening in game. Keep the third person ADS on the transition there. And if you want the inverted flashbang on, you can have that. It makes me panic and think my game crashes when I get hit by it, so I have to leave it off for me personally. But yeah, quite a few things there in graphics across console and PC that you probably want to change. Now for audio here, some pretty straightforward things you can change outright. Change your master gain volume to whatever the comfortable level is for you. Don't have things too quiet, but also don't destroy your ears in the same process. As cool as the music is, when you first boot up this game, the music will be blasting. It sounds sick, but it's not going to give you any competitive information. So I turn music in all cases down to 0. Dialogue, I still have it about 85, so I can hear that easily. It's going to alert me of streaks and stuff in Warzone, like players dropping in on you and whatnot. So that's still important. But really what we care about here is effects, footsteps, gunfire, things that are going to clue us into where enemies might be. All your default stuff for your audio devices, just set that up for your computer and everything, or your system. Audio mix is really going to come down to your individual headset and audio situation. If you're playing on speakers, or if you have IEMs, or if you have a setup like mine where I have an amp into my mixer, into my headset here that's super overkill. I've always typically in recent years played on just the default mixes and it's worked well, but I'll change this up a million times throughout the year. Some days it's like, man, I can't hear footsteps. That's it. I'm trying headphones. Nope, don't like the sound of that. I don't really like some of the other like bass boost, bass cut stuff that makes the game sound too tinny or echoey. So it's really gonna come down to your individual setup and what you think sounds good for you. I'd recommend testing out pretty much all of these and seeing if one in specific makes it seem like you hear footsteps more, or your directional audio is better there. Mono audio I keep on off. If you want to mute it when it's minimized, that's fine. I personally mute the licensed music so I don't get any copyright stuff in the videos here. Then functionality, absolutely reduced tinnitus sound. No one wants more ringing, so turn that on there. You can have whatever hit marker preset you want to have on there. Then the voice chat stuff, don't really need to mess with this. If you want it on, keep it on. If you want it off, turn it off. Same deal with prox chat, everything like that. Nothing really matters here too much. And then lastly, for the important stuff, interface. There's quite a few things here that you want to mess with as well. So I turn off like all the gameplay tips and tool tips. I don't care about that stuff. I also turn on the skip intro movie so I can just get right into the game there. Telemetry is what's very important here. If you're on PC, you're obviously going to have a lot more options than console. I personally turn on FPS counter, server latency, and packet loss. That way I can see my frames. I can see if I'm lagging on the server, and I can see if there's packet loss happening in game. As I mentioned earlier, with like reflex low latency, you want to turn on your GPU time and your CPU time to figure that out in game, and then you can turn that off after you figured out if you need on or on plus boost. But FPS counters, server latency latency, loss, those are the main ones you want to focus on. With that, you can have the size larger if you want that, and definitely have the network in-game icons on. That way you can see, is there packet loss going on? Is there latency variation going on? That's important to know for sure. With readability here, I leave stuff mostly as default, but what's really important here is color customization. You can do this on PC or console. First up, in the color palette here, I like to change neutral to a more vibrant color like purple. It's just going to make things, for me, a little bit stand out more, whether it is objectives, anything of that nature. I like to change that. And you can change this to whatever color you want for certain things. If you want the enemies to be a different shade of red or something, you can do so. What's really important here, though, is the color filter at the bottom. Filter 2 and filter 3 are both going to be more saturated. Filter 1's like some colorblind stuff. Filter 2, though, is a little bit more saturated. You turn that on, your game's going to look prettier, basically. And this is especially useful on console where you can't go through and like change your graphics on your desktop through like NVIDIA and whatnot, right? Then change the color filter target to both, and you can adjust the saturation more. I keep the interface pretty high, the world up at 80, and it just makes the game naturally look a lot better. In some cases, easier to see things as well. So that's pretty important there. Then for gameplay HUD, I keep the HUD on. obviously just basic stuff there. I don't like the radar depth stuff going on, so I keep that off. Minimap, I keep all this on pretty much default here. Crosshair dot I keep on, and I like the larger dot scale. That's pretty important there for that center dot. And then you can adjust the opacity, the color if you want as well as needed. But that's all the main stuff. Nothing you really need to worry about in account network. But as you're jumping into Black Ops 7 beta for the first time, either in early access or through the open beta, whichever you're checking out, console or PC, you can go through and adjust these things and be all set up as you're checking the game out for the first time, or adjust things as needed over the course of gameplay. You know, mess with your settings, your audio, fine tune things, and have it ready for launch there, of course. But that said, that's going to wrap things up for this video. If you guys enjoyed, you found it helpful, do me a favor, drop a like on it. And if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button on your way out. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.